I just pulled this jumper out of my dressing up box and I kind of love it. It's very pink and I'm not usually a very pink person, but look how furry it is. So a subject that keeps coming up in the comments section on YouTube is about different types of plants and their susceptibility to pests. And this is something that I don't think I've really covered that much in videos before. I know I've said, for example, like this certain type of alocasia is a magnet for pests, but I haven't really spoken about it on the opposite end of the scale. And we are very much in pest season here in the UK at the moment. So it felt like a good time to be making this video. But first, if you're new here, hi, my name's Claire and this is Yoli. I make videos all about houseplant care, sharing tips and tricks I've learnt over the years to help keep your plants happy and healthy. And so yeah, I have gone through and I've picked out 10 houseplants in my collection that I've had for a while and have never in any way been affected by pests. Some of them have been in direct contact with pests and in amongst other plants that have had pests. And they've just been really, really easy in that department. So I'm going to take you through all of them in this video. So yeah, I hope you enjoy it and I hope you find it useful. Let's get into it. So something I feel like I need to start this video off by saying, and I have said this in lots of other videos as well, is that healthy plants on the whole are much less susceptible to getting pests. And I know the reason I kind of feel like I need to stress that is that because a lot of the time in the kind of houseplant community, in the houseplant world, the social media world, a lot of us are very focused on the fastest possible growth, and I will continue to bang on about this, but fast growth and healthy growth are not always the same thing. So be very mindful about what you're putting into your soil, be using good quality soils, be not spraying your plants with nasty chemicals. It's just really important to focus on growing your plants healthily. And if you do, chances are when you do get pests, they're going to be much more manageable to deal with and an infestation is less likely to take over your collection. And then the other thing to say as well is that often yellow leaves on plants, which can be totally normal, but often that signals to pests that it is a potentially unhealthy plant and it can draw pests to that plant. So removing those leaves is always a really good idea. There is a reason why yellow sticky traps are yellow, because a lot of the time they will attract pests. The same thing happens in nature when a plant has a yellow leaf. So the first plant that I want to talk about is the Agena Silver Queen, and I've spoken about this plant in so many videos before because I think it is just the most beautiful thing in the world. And Agena is a genus that I am slightly obsessed with. I have made a full video going through all of my different types of Agena and the reasons why I love them so much. But one of the reasons why I think they are so incredibly amazing, besides the fact that they look gorgeous, is the fact that I don't think on any of my Agena have ever encountered pests. And I think because they've got that beautiful kind of striking foliage that there's almost something about it that's quite calathea-y. And obviously, if you know anything about calatheas, they are kind of renowned for being a magnet for thrips and spider mites. My Aglenemas, as I say, have never encountered problems at all. I had a philodendron probably about this time last year that had thrips really badly, and I just hadn't been that vigilant with my pest checking, and I hadn't noticed until it got quite bad. And this plant was literally pressed up next to it, and I was like, oh my goodness. I was like, well, obviously this one's going to be affected as well. And I gave it such a good check multiple times and it never got pests. And I was like, oh my goodness, how is that even possible? So yeah, it's also just a very easy plant to grow. Like, it's one that doesn't require huge levels of light, huge levels of humidity. It just kind of gets on with things and stays looking lovely and never really gives me any grief. I'm hoping that making this video isn't going to massively jinx myself because, as I say, all of these plants so far have been fine. Long may that last. But yeah, I'm currently growing this one in Lechuza Pond. I've got it in a tower pot just like that. So I've got a little reservoir of water at the bottom and it's doing really well like that. I did just have it in a chunky soil mix before, and I only transferred it to pond really because I was struggling with fungus gnats. And if we're counting pests, then yes, fungus gnats have affected any of my plants with soil here and there over the years. But that's my own fault for not staying on top of it. I have spoken before about nematodes, and I use them to get rid of fungus gnats, and I just hadn't bought any in a while. So yeah, I changed out its soil, and I also do really like having plants in semi-hydro just because I'm able to monitor the roots a little bit better. They're less susceptible to issues caused by overwatering. It just makes my life a little bit easier. But yeah, this one is kind of like a solid favourite in my collection. It's a plant that I really love, and yeah, never had pests. As usual, this is absolutely typical, but a car alarm has just started going off, so I am relocating my filming position over here. I've just set up to film down here, and Yoli's decided that this is very exciting and she wants to be involved. So she's literally so close to knocking plants over right now, but I'm hoping she's gonna be careful. Famous last words. But this next one's another one that I've spoken a lot about in my videos before. It is the Hoya Obtusifolia. And I just really love this plant for many, many reasons, but the fact that it's not susceptible to pests is also definitely a reason to love it more. I just think it's so gorgeous to look at. It's so shiny and robust. It's almost like, I don't know, it's almost like a Hoya in some senses. Yeah, there's something about it that kind of gives me Hoya vibes. But it's just the easiest plant in the world to grow. You'd think it's one that needed ridiculously high light, seeing as it is a semi-succulent, but this one grows just by my TV just there, which doesn't get the most amount of light, and it still gives me beautiful growth. I've got it in semi-hydro, and I've got a little tray that goes underneath this pot, which has like a teeny tiny water reservoir in, and I just fill that as and when. The plant seems really happy like that. And yeah, so like looking at the structure of the plant, it's one that I would think if it was gonna be the target of any pest, the one that I would assume it would be affected by the most is mealybugs, just because it is so kind of waxy. And although you can't always look at a plant and tell what kind of pest it would be more likely to be affected by, I've found that there are some that I look at and I'm just like, oh my god, that velvety plant is going to be such a target for thrips, for example, because I know thrips do really like velvety leaves a lot of the time. The same as I've just said with kind of like more succulent plants. Typically mealybugs are the ones that are going to go for them more. I say that though, I do have a Ripsalis red coral cactus, and that one I wouldn't have thought would have been affected by thrips, and very recently I did have thrips on that plant. So you can never completely write off any pest, but in my experience it does tend to be that way around when it comes to kind of judging it. But yeah, I just honestly can't recommend this plant enough. I think it would be a great beginner one. It's the only potential downfall that I can see with this plant is overwatering, because as I say, it is pretty drought tolerant. But it's one that just seems to take neglect pretty well and still look really lovely. Like, as I say, I barely do anything to this plant, and I think it looks pretty gorgeous and has never been affected by pests. And this next one's absolutely gorgeous, but it's one that I don't tend to talk that much about in videos. It is the Mandula Pothos. And I think the main reason that I don't tend to speak about it that much is just because this one is really, really slow to grow. It's a little bit like the Pothos Enjoy. Very rewarding growth when it does come, but they do just take a little while to get going. And I've had this cutting for I think about 5 months, 6 months now. I mean, I got it and it already had quite a few leaves, and it's only given me maybe 1 or 2 in the time that I've had it, so it is very slow. But the reason that this one made it onto the list is because this is one that was in between one plant with spider mites and one plant with thrips, and I was so sure that it was going to have something. I was so sure it was going to have something. And similarly to the Aglaonema that I spoke about at the beginning of the video, I checked it multiple times and it just had nothing. It was like, and the other two, like the infestations weren't awful, but it wasn't just like 1 or 2 pests. There were quite a lot. And yeah, this one just stayed looking lovely and was not affected at all. And the thing that I really like about this plant as well is that its leaves are much waxier than the standard like golden pothos, for example. They're almost a little bit more succulent-y. They're not, I mean, they're still very kind of leafy and foliagey, but there's something about them that is a little bit more robust. And I can imagine if it did get thrips or spider mites, showering this plant off would probably be quite an effective method to just get rid of the pests. And I say that, I mean, I know you can technically do that for all plants, but I know some plants with a little bit more texture in their leaves, or velvety plants, for example, can kind of hold on to eggs, for example, for quite a long time. But plants that are that little bit waxier, like the bird of paradise, for example, I'm looking at my bed of paradise, tend to be very easy to treat for pests, touch wood. My bird of paradise had spider mites fairly recently, and I got them gone in literally one treatment, which is unheard of. So yeah, I think it would be fairly similar in that sense. But no, I just think it's beautiful. I love how the variegation's so different on all of its leaves. It's quite unpredictable in its growth structure as well, which is something I really enjoy. And I'd really just love to try and get this one to fill out a little bit more. It's, I think, probably going to take a little bit of time unless I get more cuttings, just because it is quite slow. But I'm loving watching it grow, and it's given me no grief at all. And I might need to put some clips in of this plant because it's very, very big, and it would have been very easy to show you when I was standing over there, but it's not quite so easy here. But this is my variegated Euphorbia ingens, and this applies to both my variegated Euphorbia and my big Euphorbia acarensis as well, which I couldn't bring over here because it is just too big and heavy. But both of these ones have literally been a walk in the park for me when it comes to pests. And I've said it in other videos before, but since I moved to this flat, having previously never struggled with mealybugs, I have on and off had little mini infestations of mealybugs pretty much everywhere. And it's been so frustrating. I found it so difficult to get them gone. I found it so difficult to keep them under control. And these are two plants, my two euphorbias, these are two that I would have thought would be very badly affected by mealybugs. And I have had plants around these plants that have had mealybugs. There's been mealybugs that have made it onto so many of my plants, and I've been so vigilant with my checking on these two because I love them, and because I know it would be very easy to miss, because obviously, especially with this one, it's variegated. If there was just a little something here or there, you might not see it. But I've had no problems at all, absolutely none. And I've actually been quite surprised. And these two are the ones that actually prompted me to make this video, because I've been very surprised that I haven't encountered anything. And yeah, they're just two plants that I find just very enjoyable to grow. I've banged on about my love for them before, but I just find them very satisfying. Like, I love the fact that because they're succulents and not cacti, they're actually very fast to grow as well. Like, that is all new growth from this season, and I've got a similar or slightly larger actually amount of growth at the top with some new branching as well, which I'll put a clip in of. But no, I love them so much. I think they're amazing. They're very easy. Again, overwatering, I think, is probably going to be your biggest downfall if you are a beginner, because they're very drought tolerant. But yeah, they're brilliant plants. Never get pests, and I think they're great. And this is one of the plants that I've just treated for fungus gnats, and I can still see a couple buzzing around the soil. So sorry if you can see those. But this one is the Saria Moonshine, and to be honest, I could have used any Sansevieria for this. I just decided to show you the Moonshine because I know I don't speak about this one perhaps as much as some of my other Sansevieria. I also know that this plant is now officially classified as a Dracaena as well. I just am so stuck in saying Sansevieria, and that's what I always think of it as, so that's what I call it. But yeah, all of my snake plants have just been so easy again. I mean, they are known for being kind of like the unkillable plant. They don't tend to be very susceptible to pests, and I can't say I've ever noticed pests on any of my Sansevieria. I think as well because their growth comes from the bottom, they're kind of self-heading in that way. They're a lot easier to monitor when it comes to pests because anything would probably be contained in that area, and if it wasn't and it was on the leaves, it would be pretty easy to wipe away, I would have thought. Have any of you ever had pests on Sansevieria? I'd be really interested to know if you had, because I don't think I've ever heard of anyone encountering pests with this type of plant. But yeah, it's absolutely beautiful, and I just love the shades of green within this one. It's almost got a silvery hue to it, which I think is so beautiful. And if you're looking for something that you can kind of water like once a month and then forget about and it will continue to look lovely, this one is definitely a very good option. And I feel like this one kind of deserves to have had pests because it is a plant that I completely neglect. This is my big ZZ plant, very big nowadays. And this is one that is just like, I've said it before, but I think it's kind of on par with snake plants in how easy it is to care for. I literally do nothing to it. I will water it every now and again. I had a moment and thought that was a mealybug, but it is just where a leaf fell off. That would be typical, wouldn't it? But yeah, it's a plant that, again, I've kind of lugged around here, there and everywhere with me over the years, and it's been amongst other plants that have had pests. It's been amongst other plants that have had mealybugs. And again, I feel like just looking at it, because it is quite waxy, I feel like it is a plant that mealybugs would quite like. And yeah, it's never been affected. And to be honest, I haven't even needed to be that like vigilant with my checking with it. I'm not saying that you should cut corners when it comes to pest checking, because you absolutely shouldn't. But I have kind of grown to know that there's some plants I'm going to have to monitor much closer than others. For example, my Alocasia portadora that is just behind the camera there. I'll turn it around so you can see it. Can you see it? This plant? I'm not sure what you can see on the screen right now, but that one has been so awful for pests. Thrips, spider mites, you name it. Mealybugs even, that plant has had it. And it just seems to constantly be getting pests no matter what I do. So yeah, with plants like that, I know that I need to be constantly monitoring them. Like, I pest check that plant multiple times a week just to make sure that I don't lose it. Whereas with this one, I think the last time I actively pest checked it was about 4 months ago, which I know isn't good. But I just get it in the shower, I give it a quick look over. If I can't see anything, I don't go through and kind of check every individual little leaf. It just never gives me any issues. It's one that can survive in very low lighting conditions. It doesn't need a huge amount of water. It doesn't require much care, and it doesn't seem to get pests. So yeah, if you're looking for something, I don't know, something with lovely texture, like, I do think it's a beautiful plant and I do love it, but something that you're not going to have to do that much to or worry about that much, this would definitely be a very good shout. And then next to it, another one that I've never had to worry about is the golden pothos. And this is just kind of like a standard classic plant. It's a brilliant beginner plant. It's one that kind of makes all the beginner lists. It is, unlike the Mandula pothos that I showed you earlier in this video, it is so fast to grow. Like, I cannot count the amount of times I've chopped this one back. It's a very easy plant on the whole. It can take a bit of neglect. It's very adaptable when it comes to different lighting conditions. And I have seen pothos plants with thrips before, but never badly. And mine have never had thrips. I don't think I've ever had a pothos plant that's been brought down by any kind of pest. And I have had pothos plants since before I even started getting into plants, because they are just so easily accessible and so easy to care for. But it is just a really beautiful one. And if you're trying to create that kind of jungly vibe in your home, they're brilliant for training vines to climb, and I've done that in lots of areas of my house. I've got a beam and I've got pothos vines going up the beam. I've got one going around the poles in my bedroom. I realise that sounds like pole dancing poles in my bedroom. That's not what I meant, actually. Me and Ross have just been working on a project. Oh my god, I'm digging myself a hole. Me and Ross have been working on a project that you will see very soon that has nothing to do with pole dancing, and yes, we've just trained some plants to climb around the poles. It's just a really, really pretty plant, and again, I really like how all of its leaves are very different. Like, I've got some that are kind of solid green. I've got others that are really, really splashy. I'm actually wondering, oh, I know I just said this was a golden pothos. I have a feeling I might have potted a couple of sections of it up together without realising, because there's also some of these sections, like these leaves here, look very marble queeny. And I may well have done that. I potted this up a very long time ago, so I think I might have some golden pothos and some marble queen in here, but both of which are very, I mean, I was kind of struggling which one to put on the list because I have got both. And both are, in my experience, very unlikely to get pests. Yeah, again, I've had lots of other plants around these ones that have had pests. They never seem to have got anything. And they are just wonderful and very rewarding plants to grow. And I wanted to put a Hoya on this list, and I've chosen the Hoya Carnosa. And before I moved here, I had never had pests, I don't think, on any of my Hoyas. And obviously I've already said when I moved here I started getting mealybugs, and mealybugs have affected my Hoyas probably more than any other plant in my collection. And this is the only one that has not been affected, and again, it has been around other plants with mealybugs. I'm not saying it couldn't be, because I think most Hoyas probably could be, but it just for whatever reason has not got them. So currently this one has been fairly straightforward for me. But as I say, typically you don't tend to find things like thrips and spider mites on Hoya plants. The only type of Hoya that I've had thrips on before is the Hoya polyneura, and that one's got slightly thinner leaves, so I guess that kind of makes sense. But typically, I think probably just because they are so robust and waxy, a lot of pests can't really latch onto them and like feed in the same way as they would for something thinner and foliagier. Oh my god, I don't know what's happened to my brain today. But yes, this one has been very, very easy for me, and I also just think it's the most beautiful Hoya. I really love it. It's super fast growing for a Hoya as well. I got this one at the beginning of the year and it was just a few cuttings, and now it is a beautiful, beautiful full plant. So yeah, it's another one that I definitely recommend. Obviously do keep an eye on it, because as I say, I've learnt to just accept the fact that Hoyas do get mealybugs, but so far we're in the clear. And another one that I've just never had to worry about in the pest department is the aloe vera. And I've got a couple of different types of aloe vera, but this is my biggest plant. And again, I guess if it was to be susceptible to something, I would probably say mealybugs, but because you can kind of see into the stem structure, I can't actually show you very well on camera, but because you can see into it quite well, I would have thought it would be a fairly easy plant to monitor. And I've just never encountered any issues whatsoever with this one. So yeah, for me, it has been just a pest-free, very easy plant. It's one also, like, it's a succulent that for me has grown quite quickly. Like, I've had this one since it was about the size of that little pup that's just coming up there in the soil. And this is all growth from the last year and a half. I think that's about right. Year and a half, 2 years. And I think that is pretty good, all things considered. And it's also a succulent that although prefers slightly brighter light, doesn't need like super, super bright light. I know some people hear succulent and they think, oh, well, it must need to grow in the sun. This one grows on my dining table just there, and it doesn't get any direct sun. My mum's actually got one growing in low light. I don't think I would suggest doing that, but hers is doing pretty well, so. But yeah, very easy, no pests, and again, would highly recommend. And then the last one is the Rhaphidophora Tetrasperma, and there's a story behind this plant. Something's just happened to this plant this morning, but I will talk to you about that in a moment. But this is one that has never, for me, ever got pests. It's also known as Monstera minima. It's got those beautiful little splits in its leaves. And I know some people have said that their Rhaphidophora tetraspermas are very, very, very susceptible to pests. And I personally think it comes down to whether or not you've got a tissue culture plant. And for me, like, you can see all of my one's leaves are quite small and uniform, and supposedly that means that I've got a true Rhaphidophora tetrasperma. Whereas if you look at one, like for example my friend Emma's, we had this conversation a while ago, but hers are they're much bigger, they're much more unpredictable in the way that they grow, and I'm pretty sure that hers is a tissue culture plant. I think that's the way around that we established they were. But yeah, I'm also pretty sure that she's had pests on hers, but I've never had pests on mine. And again, it's another one that has been amongst plants with pests, and yeah, I would have thought that it probably would, and it just hasn't. But the drama with this plant this morning So I made a video last week essentially kind of rehabbing, restyling this plant, and I did say at the time, this is weird, some of its leaves towards the bottom are looking very yellow. And I came back yesterday and I looked at where I'd put it along the wall, and all of the bottom leaves had gone completely yellow. Some of them had gone completely brown and they'd just fallen off. So I didn't want to risk losing the plant, so I've chopped her, and I didn't want to have to do it, and I might even need to chop her up even more because I think this might be a little bit too long to be propagating like this, but I just did this overnight so that she would stay hydrated. But yeah, I'm really sad about that, so stay tuned for what happens next with this plant. But yeah, those are all of the ones that I would currently recommend if you're wanting to go for something that, in my experience, is not susceptible to pests. If you've got others as well that you found just haven't got pests and you would have maybe expected to, then please do let me know in the comments below. I'd be very interested to know. And if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, have a lovely day, and I will see you in the next video. Bish bash bosh.